And we're
Hello.
live.
Hi, everybody. It's so lovely you can be here. I thought we would do little introductions before we got started chatting and answering your questions. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tasha Suri. I'm the author of The Books of Amber and the upcoming start of the Burning Kingdoms trilogy, The Jasmine Throne, which is out in June, which is about two morally grey sapphics, one of whom is a captive princess bent on vengeance, and the other who is a priestess hidden as a maidservant who must work together to bring down an empire, as you do. And as you do. And I think that's everything about me, so I will hand over.
Hi, everybody. I am Sheree, or C.L. Clark. You can call me Sheree, author of the beginning of the Magic of the Lost trilogy, The Unbroken, aka Terrain's Arms. And The Unbroken is about also two sapphics who maybe should not be interested in each other, as one of them tries to bring down the empire that the other one is in charge of.
I feel like our books have quite a lot of thematic commonalities.
I'd say more than a little. I think it was very well timed by Orbit. They go well together.
I should have shown my book as well. I just realized when you very smoothly picked yours up that I brought mine in and then I didn't, here it is. That's the advanced reader copy.
Look at them both together.
Oh, I'll bring it back. But yours is the finished copy now, isn't it? Because it's out in like a week. Yeah.
They look so good together. Soon they'll be
They really do. I love that there's kind of almost a thematic similarity between the covers as well. Like there's like the blazing heat of the sun, fieriness on mine. But I mean, yours has the arms. We can talk about the arms if you would like to.
We can do that. People are mentioning the Tommy Arnold cover aspect in the chat, so I will just bring that back for everybody. It's not as clear as it could be. My camera is a little bit crap. But so Tommy Arnold did the art, designed by Orbit's very own Lauren Panepinto. And the thing I think I like the most about it is just the power stance. It's usually, what do they call it? T-pose? She's T-posing. It's usually reserved for like the doodly characters in fantasy, like a man in his throne or something like that. But we get to sort of we get to flip that gender expectation on its head a little bit, which is, I'm a fan of it.
I think it's really cool. I think one of the things I really loved about The Unbroken when I read it was that you got to read, a lot of different people, but for me, what really stood out was the women got to be really messy and awful in kind of like in ways that I think but that I've mostly seen male characters get to be. Sorry, that was a fly. That kind of like the grizzled, slightly morally questionable kind of general figure, the young soldier trying to do right in very difficult circumstances, the heir to the throne who is in like dire straits because of politics. All of that kind of stuff is often kind of coded as really like male and masculine, and I think you kind of took it and did something really interesting with it. I mean, do you want to talk about that a bit? Because I
Sure. So I think the thing that I was most interested in isn't just the messiness of it, but like the times we're allowed to be messy and be understood, I guess. And that kind of understanding is usually reserved for male characters, whether it's understanding and redemption, or just like, even if it's a completely unredeemable villain, like they're sympathetic or anti-hero status or something like that. Any sort of sympathy is usually only reserved for male characters in that stripe. Whereas when women are bad and messy and like make mistakes or are just like plain evil, you don't get that kind of forgiveness, I guess. The assumption that they have a bigger plan or some sort of real reason for what they're doing. So I guess that was kind of what I wanted to do with The Unbroken, was make all of that happen together.
I think you really did that. And like when you were saying that, it kind of made me think that it's the interiority of sort of semi-villainous characters that people end up writing fanfic about. It's that kind of, oh, they're evil, but there's something sympathetic about them, and I must explore this in a, you know, enemies to lover trope, 30k multi-chapter thing. Anyway.
Not that I would be mad if somebody decided they needed to write that. I would never read it, but I would be excited.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't be able to read it, but if it existed, you wouldn't complain, right? Yeah. Because I always find that what I'm fascinated about with women characters is femininity. Like, I think much like so many of the characters you wrote about are not allowed the, I guess, the privilege of being human and being treated like people. I often think that femininity, or being like very stereotypically feminine, is associated again with kind of being less human or being property, or only being allowed to be human if you perform femininity in really specific ways. So that's something that I kind of try to explore through like through the princess, who is very feminine. Consciously, I would say she's a bit of a high femme, but the minute she does something that's not acceptable, she's monstrous. And that was kind of stuff that I wanted to explore. And I think it was really nice to kind of feel like when you put our books next to each other, you're seeing like the full range of what society or societies would kind of consider monstrous. I don't know if I'm going too deep, but that's kind of...
No. I'm listening. I'm listening very closely. Keep going. Yeah, I totally get that. Because I feel like I write on the opposite spectrum. Because like you said, there's a very narrow realm of what is acceptable, and if you're like high femme or if you're masculine, you don't get any leeway. And so I think consciously or unconsciously, I think I made a cast full of women who don't fit. Like I do have one high femme character who I think, like, I can't wait to do more stuff with her. I love her, Malika. She like gets dressed up and she's like, yeah, I'm a rebel. Wait, ignore that, guys. Don't listen to that.
You didn't hear anything. It's
nothing. But everybody else is on the more masculine side of the spectrum, even the ostensibly straight women. I just really enjoyed getting to cast that net of expectation off and let them just do whatever. And I'll probably explore that a bit more in book 2. We're going to get introduced to a dandy, like a sapphic dandy. I'm so excited.
Oh, those are my favorites. Oh, I'm excited. I think you kind of know that I really enjoyed The Unbroken. But I really enjoyed it. I like that there was so much that was very traditional fantasy about it, but also kind of not at all. And I think I'd be quite interested to hear like your approach to the colonialism in it, because it felt very specific. I felt like you drew from a very specific kind of colonialism. Do you want to talk about that, or?
Yeah. But then we're going to trade, because I want to know about your process. So I come from, like, my area of study specifically is French and English literature, and then in grad school it kind of expanded a bit more to war literature. But because of my background in French literature, a lot of what I read was Francophone African literature, and so that definitely influenced the lens that I was, when I was first thinking about colonialism. That was kind of my like light bulb moment. I was like, oh, France is not actually like this beacon of art and joy that I learned about when I was in, like, you know, middle school, high school studying French. Like, it wasn't until college that I really started like figuring out how Europe got to be so European. And so that influenced quite a lot of it. And some of the stuff, like with the Sands, came from how all of Europe used their soldiers as conscripts. Like, they brought in people from their colonies to fight their wars for them. But also how America used Black soldiers and was like, oh, well, you can be free afterwards, and they weren't. So those are kind of the big influences, as well as just like children taking from indigenous people all over the world as well. So that's
I just thought it was really cool. Like it did make me think of French colonialism particularly, and but I like that you had so many other influences that kind of came into it as well. It was just really cool. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it before. Obviously, if you have book recommendations, feel free to make them. But I really enjoyed it.
I'll think about that. Okay, your turn.
I don't know. I'm kind of like always interested in empire as a concept, and I think that when I was doing the Jasmine Throne in particular, I wanted to think about empire in a slightly different way than I did in the books of Amber, which was very like big evil empire. What happens when an empire falls? Everything kind of sucks, because as bad as let's pick a random system, as capitalism is, if you get rid of capitalism, the getting rid of process is going to be nasty. There's just no way around that. And that was something I kind of looked at in the books of Empire around a romance, as you do. But with the Jasmine Throne, I wanted to look at the impact of the kind of the messiness of empire, and how people can be very invested in it and they can believe that it's important. And yeah, I don't know if I explained that very well, but that was that was kind of something I wanted to explore. And how when you buy into a system, whether it's an empire and ruling an empire, or buying into like nationalism, which some of the characters do, it kind of, it does horrible things to you, and it does horrible things to the world around you. Again, don't know what the opposite is.
Well, that's what book you've got a trilogy, so that's what like book 2 and 3 get to explore.
Yeah, sure, totally. That's what they do. I've just handed in book 2 actually, the first draft. So it's, when you've drafted it and you're waiting for revisions and you're like, this is bad, I will improve on it later. It's not bad. You should buy it, but but it's in that kind of in between stage where I'm not quite sure it's doing what I want it to do. So hopefully it will. Yeah. In
a similar spot, I also turned in book 2 a few weeks ago. I know it's got some holes that I will fill. Everybody, don't worry, they'll be fixed. I have some great ideas. I've been playing video games on it.
I do the same thing.
Well, I was playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and something did completely unlock. There was a character who you'll meet her in book 1, but you won't get to hang out with her until book 2. But she was in one place, and now she gets a whole new place and a whole new job, and it's going to be awesome. Just wait, guys. There was a trope that I just really love, and it showed up in the video game, and it also showed up in a different video game. And I was like, wow, I really love this. It always makes me cry. So I got to do it.
Of course you're going to make people cry. Of course that's something you've decided to do in book 2. So excited.
So I wanted to ask you a question. It's a slight turn, but kind of related to the shift from the Amba books to Jasmine Throne. So for those of you who haven't read the...
Oh no, I think you've frozen, or I've frozen.
Kind of romance. Jasmine Throne is a bit more, I won't say it's not warming, because I definitely wanted to get but it's more complicated. There's like people are causing each other more pain. Can you talk a little bit about your decision to shift from like one kind of romantic narrative to another, if there is anything to say other than I wanted to? Which is totally valid.
I think I tried to explain this on Twitter once and people yelled at me, but I'm going to do it again. When I write like romances between a man and a woman, or a heterosexual or a kind of like traditional romance, I think there's so much baggage inherent in those already, that I always found, I used to read a lot of kind of like Mills and Boon pulp romance, which has changed a lot since I started reading it as a kid, just to be clear. So this is not a read on modern romance, but a lot of it was didn't deal with consent or masculine toxicity very well. And I think a lot of it was wish fulfillment of how those things could just be dealt with magically, which is fine. That there's an audience for that. Often that audience was me. But when I write a male-female romance, I always want to explore consent and what it means to be a good person and what it means to be a good man. Maybe I just have very complicated feelings around masculinity. I don't know. So to that end, the romances in those books are kind of a little bit more like cinnamon rolly and like, yeah, they've got a heat level, but they're very much about establishing trust and intimacy and consent in ways that I really wanted to explore. And I think Empire of Sand was really about consent and whether you can give consent in certain like systems and in certain circumstances. Whereas I didn't get to read a lot of sapphic or even gay literature growing up, outside of maybe fanfic. And as I read more of it, I kind of got annoyed that a lot of sapphic stuff was very sweet, which is again fine and has an audience, but the audience was once again not me. And I was like, I just want to read about women getting to be mean and horrible to each other. Yeah, and I think you'll get that because I read your book. And I just wanted to read about sapphic relationships that were as messy and as complicated and as epic as heterosexual romances have long been allowed to be. I think there are some people who aren't comfortable with that for a variety of reasons because there's so little rep that you kind of want it to be good. And but
like
then
positive, nice kind of.
Yeah. And I was like, but I don't want it to be positive and nice. I want something nasty and difficult, but also very, they're not horrible to each other. They care about each other a lot, but they're complicated people who do complicated things that are often not kind. So that's why I went a different direction, because I wanted to write the kind of sapphic relationship that I wanted to read. And luckily, and the great thing is obviously that in SFF now, there are so many relationships like that to read, which is great.
I think the thing I also really like about the Jasmine Throne is that they both, Priya and Malini, both really, really, really want something, but it's not each other. Like, I mean, they want each other, but the thing they want most is not each other. And I feel like women are often denied that kind of like that torn soul moment, or like the chance to want something that doesn't have to be someone that they have to take care of necessarily. Like, it can be a thing. It could even be power, or like something they shouldn't want, but they can want it very, very badly. And that's something that I loved seeing in the Jasmine Throne. So
I'm very interested in how you depicted in the choices you made around Luca and Terrain. I don't really have like a specific question. I just think I just kind of want to know your thought process there and what led you to writing that relationship, because it's, it's an inherently problematic one, right? Like their power dynamics are so yeah. So I'm just interested.
When I first started writing it, it was a very uncomplicated. I was like, I want a bodyguard princess romance, and I want it to be gay. And that was just like younger me trying to just please me. And the more I wrote it, though, the more I really started thinking about, the larger context. Like, what does it mean to be in love with someone in colonial empire when that person is ostensibly either in charge of you or under your power? And at one point, before I figured out exactly how bad I wanted Luca to be, like, did I want her to be just like normal colonizer bad, or if I wanted her to be like bad colonizer bad, all of which are bad, clearly. But I feel like there are some ways where there is at least like the hope for redemption, and there are some ways where, and I have the characters who are like this, where there's no hope, and you really want them to be like killed in some way or another, usually painfully. And so a lot of drafts were about tweaking their dynamic and figuring out what kind of story I wanted to tell in this book, but also down the road. And some of it was still me. Like, I still think that their power dynamics, there's something fun, not like enjoyable to them, but enjoyable for me as a reader to see that back and forth tug of figuring out where you should be and whether or not it is possible. I think like that was my tagline. If it's not on the back of the book, it was in my query letter. Like they're trying to figure out if there is a line somewhere between love and duty. Like, are they compatible, or are they not? Yeah.
I love that. Again, it felt really like the kind of complex, almost fealty relationships that you often see again between male characters, and quite rarely between women. And I love that. I'm conscious that we have 10 questions.
Yeah.
So
let's check it out.
Just open it up. Let's see. So I guess we go from the top.
Sure.
Yeah.
What are you reading right now, Tasha?
Oh, I have a different top question.
Wait, what?
It's fine. What am I reading right now? I'm reading The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid.
Oh, I maybe have that in my inbox.
I'm really enjoying it. So I haven't read like a huge amount of Jewish fantasy before. I read like Rena Rossner, who's published by Orbit, and I don't know, would Uprooted count? Not Rooted,
the silver one. Yeah,
the silver one. Thank you. But it feels both like super familiar and yet completely different. The writing is so lush and poetic and gruesome. It has a faith in it called the Patrifaith, and I was like, yes, this book and I will get along, because it's like, and the Patrifaith is bad, and it's really good. It's folkloric, I would guess is the term. Like, it's not fairy tale, it's like folkloric Jewish fantasy. There's a one-eyed tortured prince who kneels a lot.
I like it. I like it already. Yeah.
It's very saucy, I think I would say. I don't think that was necessarily Ava's intent, but this is what I'm taking from the book. So I can recommend that. What are you reading at the moment?
I am mostly reading Slush, actually. For those of you who don't know, I also edit the podcast, the fantasy podcast, Podcastle. And so I'm reading a lot of things for that, as well as the submissions for the We're Here queer anthology, like the best of 2020 queer short stories. So I'm reading for that as well. I am very, very slowly, piece by piece, reading a Desolation called Empire. No, wait, is it Desolation? Called Peace.
Yep.
Which I love and is very much in conversation with our Empire books, thinking about it on a sci-fi scale, but yeah.
A Memory Called Empire was the first one, wasn't it? That was really cool. I love the way it dealt with things like poetry.
I know, it's so good.
Just like a linguist dream, that book. And it was Spinning Silver. That was the name of the Naomi Novik books. Guggins just said in the chat. So thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. So the next question that I can see, so I don't know why they're in a different order for us, is what were some of the toughest choices you had to make for characters, plot, etc. in each of your books?
Bix! That's one of my buddies. Toughest choices for me or for you? Do you want to take it?
I can't think. Wait.
Okay. I'll let you think.
Yeah, thank you.
Toughest choice. I think one of the toughest choices, especially because I'm still dealing with it right now, is kind of that question: how to deal with Terrain and Luca's relationship, because there is a certain amount of like me, the fan, and also the like little like the romantic fan fiction I want to be writing in my heart, and then there's an amount of honesty that I want for them and for their situation, and it's hard to kind of reconcile that. Like, obviously I'm the writer, I can do whatever I want, but I'm very aware of the fact that I am telling a story about colonialism, and regardless of my intent, I know also how this book is being read.
Mhm.
And I know I'm not supposed to be like paying attention to what other people say and stuff, but I am very conscious of a book's place in canons and like where it stands along with other things. And it's a complicated relationship that I want to treat with care. But I also want them to kiss a lot and maybe some other stuff. So, so it's
I don't think your readers would complain, to be honest.
No, I hope not, because there's definitely some other stuff. But woo, book 2.
I guess for me, it was writing the book at all. I mean, I could say that writing a multi-POV book was really challenging for me, because it was. But I had a really weird process even getting to the point of writing the Jasmine Throne. It kind of chose me rather than I chose it. So like, not to go all deep or anything and like personal, but I wasn't out when I wrote the Books of Amber, and then I was when I wrote the Jasmine Throne. And I hadn't known if I would ever be in a position where I could write a story that was queer openly, or at least I didn't feel comfortable doing that or safe. And then I ended up having a conversation with my agent where I was saying, I want to write this particular story. Do you think Orbit would accept it? Which kind of shows you where my brain was at, because obviously they would. And she was very supportive. My editor was very supportive. And it kind of gave me the impetus to actually write something that I otherwise wouldn't have written before. So, so yeah, weirdly, just making the choice to write it was quite tough for me.
Yeah.
But then, you know, actually writing it was tough because you have to put the words on the page, which sucks. You just kind of wish you could just make the book come out straight, and it doesn't do that. But yeah.
How long did Jasmine Throne, like, how long were you given for that?
So I think I wrote it in 3 or 4 months. Yeah, don't ask me how long I spent on the sequel, because that needs editing for a reason, because again, I wrote it in a really short time frame. But I basically handed in all my option material for the Jasmine Throne, being like, oh, let's see if they'll take it. And then they were like, yes, we will, and we want to publish it at X time. And I was like, I'll try. So yeah, 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gonna have to ask you for some tips later.
Panic, pure panic. I didn't sleep for 3 or 4 months. I had a very cute cat who would sit next to me as I wrote, and that kind of kept me going until like the early morning, and then I would go to work and then come back and write again. So it's, yeah. I wish I had a system. Shall we see another question?
So my next question, I don't know, okay, my next question has, okay, they're kind of moving a little bit. My next number 4 is, that's 4 upvotes, right? Is both of you write historical fantasy? Wait, whoa.
Oh, it moved.
Yeah. So I want to hit the villain ones, the female villain ones. So we'll save that for like in just a second. But since I already started this one, both of you write historical fantasy, which leaves some of your readers seeking out history books. Are there any in particular you recommend?
I guess it depends which bit of history you want to read about. And I've read a lot of history books that I wouldn't recommend, but were very useful to me. Like, there's this one, I can't remember the author's name for the life of me, but he wrote this book called The Gem and the Lotus, and he wrote a bunch of other books about the Mughal era, but he's super biased. Like, it was really, really useful to me when I was writing the Books of Amber, and I used a lot of stuff for the Jasmine Throne, but he like hates so many things, and he doesn't like bother to couch it in any kind of historiography. He's just like, and I hate this, and this is what's wrong with these people. And I'm like, okay, that's not historically good, but fine. So yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any recommendations?
I do, though not all of them are related directly to the Unbroken, but have been useful and or interesting in general. So if you guys are familiar with A People's History of the United States, Howard Zinn also sort of wrote. It's a comic book. Or a graphic novel, A People's History of American Empire, and similar to A People's History of the United States, it kind of strips away some of the United States school system treatment of America's role in global politics, which is generally a lot less heroic than our media likes to tell us. But also, I actually just finished listening to a really good audiobook called The Black Wave, or Black Wave, by Kim Ghattas, and it's about the rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran from 1979, and how that rivalry kind of changed what were actually fairly progressive countries into kind of these more conservative nations, and as well as the destabilization of the region, and how like a lot of that rivalry like spilled over into other countries as they kind of use them as like, I don't know, almost kind of like the US and Russia have proxy wars. There were similar things happening with other countries in the Middle East through Saudi Arabia and Iran. And it's really good, and I did not expect it to be near as readable and understandable as it was. What else did I recently read? I recently read I can't remember what it's called, but it was about Lawrence of Arabia. It's by Scott Anderson. It's about T.E. Lawrence. And
Google.
Yes, it's good.
Lawrence. It's called Lawrence in Arabia?
Yes.
Maybe? Yeah.
Yes, that's it. And so it talks about a lot of things, but kind of how, again, the US and America getting involved in things they shouldn't be, and just sort of deciding with the flick of their pen that they could do whatever they want with other countries. How England essentially betrayed the different Arab nations who had decided to help them and help them win World War I, and how between England and France and the other allied powers, they just kind of signed away things like Palestine and parts of Lebanon and all sorts of good, lovely things like that. And so essentially, you know, we could blame all of everything right over there. And also just like
you mean right over here?
Oh yeah, right here.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the two that stick out, because I just finished them in the last couple months.
It actually, what you were saying, I don't know why this reminded me, but I had to go look it up. A book that I super recommend, and it's also a TV show, I don't know if you can find it on YouTube, is A History of Christianity by Dermot McCulloch.
Ooh,
and like, you wouldn't think that Christianity is my wheelhouse, but it's this amazing, I think, because it covers so many different nations and so many different time periods, and it tells you a lot about today, but it goes very far back in time. And it shows you the way that faith and expressions of faith and politics and how that relates to faith develop. It's just so good. So A History of Christianity by Dermot McCulloch. And yeah, if you can find the TV show, it's really worth watching. And it is a book as well. So, but it's got teeny tiny print because Christianity is quite old. Yes, let's have a look. There's 16 questions now. So they keep growing. Shall I just pick a random one?
There was that I have right now, number 9 votes, has
cool.
Favorite female villains.
Like real villains or fictional, I guess. Yeah. I mean, I know it's an oldie, but I always loved Maleficent as a kid. I wanted to be Maleficent. I think it worried my mom a little bit. I was just like, that's the vibe I want as an adult. But yeah. And there's a book coming out about, I think, like a Sleeping Beauty retelling about Maleficent called
Ooh.
Malice by Heather Walter, and that's sapphic as
Yes, I want
well.
to read that so bad.
I've read it. You should get it. I'll talk to you later about that.
Okay. I think so. I like the idea of Maleficent, but I didn't actually have when I was a kid. Sleeping Beauty, like I only saw it once at like a friend's house, so she didn't imprint on me so well. But one that I actually think about a lot is if anybody saw The Lion King 2, there's a lioness who is kind of taking up Scar's mantle, and so she's getting her kid ready to be like Scar number 2 and take over Pride Rock. And I really liked her. I don't know if it's just because I like lions or what, but I thought she was pretty badass. And they make her like kind of scruffy and everything. Yes, Zira. Like I know all of her songs, all of it. And
I've never seen The Lion King 2.
It's okay. A lot of people haven't. It was I'm sure it was one of those like straight to video type things, but I loved it. And so I remember her very well. Is there a good I also like Shigo. I don't know. I just think female villains are hot, often hotter than heroes. So because they get to be bad, they get to make decisions like I might, and some of them are selfish decisions, and plus they get to wear cooler clothes, they get to wear black, and
I was going to say this is the difference between us. That I was like, the thing I loved about female villains was their aesthetic choices. Yes. It's like all I want to do is wear red lipstick and have a knife, and that's my life goal.
Yes, I really like. So I watched She-Ra, and I really loved. Oh crap! I can't remember her name.
Masked Lady.
Yeah.
I know who you mean.
Red eyes and stuff. The witch teacher. Like I love it, and I like the idea of the bad guy getting to be the teacher. Oh man, it was the best. Oh, Melisande. I remember that. Yeah,
I do like Melisande.
That's a good Shadow Weaver.
I read those books when I was like 13. I don't know who let me do that. Yeah. I think I wrote to the author, like I emailed her and I was like, this book is so important to me. Now I'm an adult. I'm like, what did she even do in response to that email? Like, hello, I'm a teenager and I read your erotic novels. Oh, God.
Someone made a good point. Elizabeth Jewell said that female villains have discarded society's constraints, and that's very much it. Especially also, you add in villains being queer-coded, and I'm like, boom. If I'm gay, I get to be bad. Let's go. Yes. And see Catra too, but I don't see her as a villain. I see her as I was kind of thinking a friend of mine and I were talking about the similarities between like the Catra She-Ra situation and Terrain's situation. But my big thing is if it was a Catra She-Ra situation, it would actually be Terrain and Pruitt, which is a different story entirely. Anyways, so moving right along to the next set of questions.
I will say there was like so much alternative shipping potential in your book, so people should write fanfic for me, if not for you.
Just tell me about it, like in a general sense.
Tell me in a specific sense, because I am allowed to read it. So, let's see.
What do you have?
I don't know which one to pick. I guess we could go, okay, how about, do you start with world building or with the characters themselves when you start to write a new series?
Ooh, yeah, this is a question that it's been passed around on Twitter a little bit, so I've been thinking about it. I believe I told Kwame that I start with a character situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it might not actually be a fully fleshed character. And it might not be a fully fleshed conflict. But because I like the situation, which could be as specific as something I get from like a prompt, like the story engine, which I've been talking about a lot. It could be like a prompt card game situation. Or it could just be like, oh, I really like the idea of the grizzled veteran, only I want her gay, and I want her to be like, well, I don't know. That's a start. So if she's grizzled and she's a veteran, then she's probably coming out of some kind of conflict. Okay, fine. I'll figure that out later. And if she's on her own, okay, why is she on her own? Okay, that's some emotional conflict. I'll figure that out later. Mm-hmm. And then it just sort of kind of builds out of that. But it could also just be like, I really like, what's a good trope? I really like insert X trope. I want there to have to be a lot of kneeling and a single bed. Okay, so what kind of position can I put two characters in where they have to kneel and have to share a bed? Oh no, how terrible.
I love that. And it's true. I think often what you're doing when you write is you're trying to write the things you enjoy, like the things you want to read or the things that you want to explore. Mm-hmm. But to do that, you kind of have to build up this structure around it to make it make sense. It's like there's the thing that you want to do, and then there's like the scene dressing. But sometimes the scene dressing takes on a life of its own and like runs away and does its own thing, and that's fine. Like I think for me, it's almost like an aesthetic Pinterest board happens in my head.
I can see that.
I see the characters, but I'm also like, I often visualize them long before I kind of know what's going on in their heads, or what's going on in their heads is very tied to what's going on visually. Like not in a, they look evil, so they are evil kind of way, but how they move, how they interact with things, what they're interacting with. So I knew that, so for example, with the Books of Amber, I knew that it would have a very Mughal aesthetic, which I drew from films around about that era, which had that aesthetic because films have an aesthetic because they're visual. With the Jasmine Throne, because I'm not drawing from a specific era, I think it kind of had the look of a kind of ahistorical fantasy look that you see in a lot of religious and mythic TV shows in India. I think that's kind of where it started. So I knew that kind of aesthetic was going on, and then I worked out from there. Which is kind of, I guess, a very visual place to start rather than a kind of character place. But then I'd often get like images of what the characters were doing. So in the Jasmine Throne, in the prologue, you have, I don't think this is a spoiler. You have like an imperial court, and there's a pyre being built, and 3 women are brought in dressed as brides. And the way that they interact with each other, with the men in the room and with the emperor, says a lot about them as characters and about the world, and that came to me before I actually world built why the hell any of that was going on.
Yeah. I think similarly with the Unbroken, I got an image. It was like a literal image of terrain getting ready, like in a sort of deserty-ish place, not entirely, just getting ready to execute some people. But the kicker for me was she had a gun, and as a fantasy writer, I was like, "What? Why does she have a gun? Like a proper like muskety rifle type thing?" And I was like, "Well, I can't do that. We got to change it. It's gonna have to be like a sword or something. We'll figure it out later." But then it was around the same time that Django Wexler's Thousand Names came out, and then Brian McClellan's Powder Mage series came out. And I was like, "Wait, okay, we can go back. We can use guns. Okay, we're gonna do that." But that was the story seed for it. All the other world building stuff definitely came much later. I actually had a really hard time doing some drafting because I hadn't figured out magic and stuff. But
I think everybody's in that position when you get to the point where your editor's like, "How does the magic work?" And you're like, "It's magic. It doesn't need to work. It's just fine. It's fine."
I think that's actually somebody's question.
Oh no.
How did you design your magic systems? Any particular inspirations?
Well, clearly we both designed it really chaotically, but again, I was very aesthetic with my magic system, I guess.
It's so cool, guys. It's so cool. And like,
thank you.
Oh man, first off, when I just tell you guys, Tasha is such an amazing visual writer. The magic was one of the coolest parts. And then the other part was how hungry I got. Like, you cannot like eat first or eat with the book.
I didn't think I put that much food in the book, but other people have said this to me as well.
Okay, well, maybe you didn't put that much food, but what food you did put in was just like, oh, my stomach would just growl.
Thank you. To be fair, I was writing at night, so I was always hungry. Like when I was like, oh, I really wish I had like a gulab jamun just to describe that. I actually do have some. Anyway, that's not the point. Yeah, I love visual stuff. I'm a very visual writer. I'm a very visual reader. Like I always see things in my head more than anything else. And I really wanted to do stuff with like flowers and plants as the magic. But then I was like, one thing that I find really disturbing is plant body horror. I really hate the idea of things like coming through skin or skin turning to
Yeah.
wood. Yeah, so I was like, that's what I'm going to do. Because it makes me uncomfortable. So that seems like a reasonable approach. So I have a lot of like plants turning to skin and plants turning fleshy and people turning plant. Yeah. And I think it's kind of like both beautiful and gruesome was kind of what I was going for. So I started there and then I had to make that logical.
Yeah.
And I would ask you if you started from logic and worked out, but you've already said that you kind of had to go back.
So
And
definitely did not start from logic, but I knew I kind of wanted some sort of healing magic. I think the thing that I started with actually was the religious system and the idea that the empire, the Baladan Empire, was coming for a resource. And so I thought, what would be a really valuable resource that they could take as far as magic goes? And so that's kind of how the Khazali magic happened. But then it wasn't until I was trying to figure out political stuff, actually, that I had to figure out how the wider world worked and what kinds of interactions all these countries had had before colonization, after, who else was just in the region, and what was their relationship with the different religions at play. And so that's kind of how we got the different like area religions and thus area magics. And I kind of tried to think of what seemed most natural to come out of a physical location. So like, and also there's a flip side to every religion. There's something that gives and something that takes.
Oh yeah.
And so you think of like the Targan bear people, they're in like a very wooded, cold region. And so their thing is like animal husbandry and hunting because they have a lot of fauna. And you can't quite call them like siblings, but maybe like cousin religious practicing tribes in the Khazali region. And so they're all like like they worship this god of animals, but then you have like this god of like human body-ishness for Khazal, and then we have and that partly came from just like history of medicine in general. It didn't really start in Europe. and so I wanted to kind of reflect that aspect. But then we've got some agricultural stuff happening in Ballader, which we'll talk more about in book 2.
I like that, the amount of thought and process that went into that, because obviously real world religions and pre and post colonization societies are quite complicated in the real world. So it makes sense that it would be kind of a really laborious process to create that in fiction as well.
So yeah, there's definitely a bit of like hand waving because I'm like, this was like several thousand years of society just messing around. And so I'm just gonna like,
I don't think it felt hand wavy. I think you just have to do enough work to make it feel real, and then people are kind of, or at least I am as a reader, kind of willing to kind of go with it, and nobody wants to read like a treatise of like the socio-political history of a region, even if it's real or not real. I mean, maybe you do, but we're not all Tolkien. We can't all do that. So
yeah, I don't want to, but I think the thing that was most important, at least in the craft aspect of it, was making sure the characters really believed it. So like the characters have to feel this creed or something like that. I think though that you did a really good job of it with the Jasmine Throne, just with like the magic is so suffused in the world that like it. I mean, it like I don't feel like the magic is in the Unbroken is very its absence is political, but with yours, I mean, I don't know how much is spoilery because I can't remember quite when everything happens, but we've got we've got several people who are trying to get to it and use it, but it is something that is living in the city as well.
Yeah.
Kind of like the forest. I can't. I'm gonna stop talking because
it's almost animistic,
dangerous.
right? Because like people worship spirits and they believe that the spirits have created X, Y, and Z, and therefore, I mean, one of the things that I found really interesting about building the magic system and the religious system is that and this happens every time I write a book, I realize that I've made some assumptions that I haven't either made explicit on the page or my editor would not have made. So I think it was one of my editors said, do all these does everybody accept each other's religions exist? Because there are at least 3 that I kind of mentioned. Do they all accept that the other is real? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, do you say that? And I was like, no. But and then I had to think about, why do they accept that every religion is real? Because obviously we have examples in the real world of people going, my religion is real and yours is not. Whereas here, everyone's like, well, my God exists, your spirits exist, my mothers of flame exist. We all accept that everybody exists, but we believe that this one is superior to this one. And that's a very different mindset, I think, that I then had to kind of make explicit and build into the world. But it's not something that even occurred to me. It was just a thing that was in the book.
I get that. Because I think I vaguely thought about it, especially because like the Balladarans don't they discount everybody's, including their own situation. They've like forcibly erased everything. But the other religious folks, they and just because magic is a matter of faith, they all kind of accept that everyone can do different things. And I don't know. It's not even technically region bound. Like if someone from one country believed in a different god, they could theoretically become a priest of that god and use that magic, if whatever. But
sorry, I've realized we've got like 8 minutes left, so we should probably. I think we need to pick. Should we pick one more question?
Yeah, final question.
Let's see who has the most upvotes. Maybe I've just not organized this very well. Maybe there's something I've done wrong. The one that says there's one with 6 votes, and it's what sapphic relationships, non-canon / queer baity or queer coded did you like growing up or when you were younger?
That's going to be hard because I feel like I'm old, and so they weren't there.
I think we're like the same age, so I think you're fine.
Okay, but I mean, when I say I feel old, I mean, in the sense of queer media, I think we are old.
Yeah. That's
like,
right.
I mean, the closest thing I think I had to something that I was like, ooh, yeah, was Melisande and Phaedra. And like, that was the first time I was like, ooh, hey. And I mean, and I mean, I found at some point, like some little lesbian romances at the library, like romance, capital R romance.
Yeah.
But they weren't memorable. They were just there and I wanted it. I guess the book that I had was like Annie on My Mind,
I've never read it even, like
well, yeah, it's that and Keeping You a Secret by Julianne Peters. Those were my first 2 the classics. But
I mean, I was lucky in the sense that I got really into anime when I was younger. I mean, and it was at the point where you really couldn't get anime in the UK at all. Like, it wasn't a thing. Don't know how I managed that. And I really liked Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune, and they were, gay and in a relationship, but they were cousins in the dub version, which is hilarious to me. So I kind of had that without really knowing that I needed it. So I kind of imprinted on that quite heavily. And I was like, I'm exactly like Sailor Neptune because I'm femme and I like music. I don't know. So that did a lot for me. And I remember writing a lot of fanfic when I was like 9. Should have clued me in on something. And I think for a long time it was fandom that kind of gave people that. Like there was Xena was a big thing, and then also
Oh,
like
Lena, definitely. But for me, I was just like, I just think she's cool.
she is cool. And Buffy and Faith was the other one, I think.
Mm.
Yeah, I read a lot. And nobody checked what I was doing, which was to my benefit. So yeah, but nothing like really published, right? There wasn't really a lot around that kind of there's a lot more now than there used to be, so that's great.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
now, I mean, just this year alone, and just from Orbit alone, like I
Yes.
feel like there are going to be some accidental 10 or 11-year-olds who are like, oh, what's this book? And I'm
But
like,
even better, like if you are like a middle grade reader or a YA reader now, you can
there's
actually
so
just go
many.
in. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can go into a bookshop and actually buy a book with a trans hero or heroine, or like with a sapphic romance or a gay romance, and I think that's so nice.
It's so amazing. I can't even.
It's so good.
Anyways,
I mean, we've actually still got like 4 minutes, which is great.
we can hit the next 6 I have is from Evan. Hi, Evan.
Evan!
Would you mind sharing one thing that's still on your author achievement bucket list? I mean, speaking of fan fiction, like that's
Yeah, I'd love some fanfic. Mine is really mercenary. I want to earn out my advance. That's it. That's what I want. I think it's now I'm in a different position from you, so I'd be really interested to hear your answer. But now that I'm a few books in, all I want is longevity. I want to know that I sell enough books that I can sell more books at a high enough earning rate that I can feasibly do it without having to have a full-time job. Which is really dull. Like it's such a dull bucket list, but it is essentially.
No, but it's an important one. It's also a fun one. Like in a sense, to know that you're bringing in money with your work is.
Yeah. I mean, also fan art. I love fan art. Like
yes, sure.
I love like lots of Chinese dramas and the amount of gorgeous fan art they get. I'm like, I want that. That's what I want.
Yeah.
I cannot make it happen, but that's my bucket list.
I mean, I think so. All of those, yes, I would like to earn out. I would definitely like to. That would be amazing.
You should all buy the book.
Then, everybody go buy both books, all of the books. Just if you can, just pre-order all 3 books of both series, like whatever. Because I can't earn out until they're all earned out. So let's go. I don't. What would other than those 3 important things, I would like to have, I don't know, some really stupidly famous person be like, oh yeah, that book's really good. Like, I'm not talking it has to be on Oprah's book club or like Obama's book list, even though that would be great. And I would earn out, boom, like that. But like, just to, I don't know, that would just be really cool. Like,
that would be awesome.
Yeah. All right. So it looks like we are wrapping up. Oh, so sapphic things.
Oh, yes, yes. No, you go.
So if you guys, it seems like you did based on the chat scroll that I can see. If you guys are into sapphic books, you might want to check out the Orbit Sapphic SFF book giveaway, which we just have a link in the chat now. You can check it out and get not just the Unbroken and the Jasmine Throne, but a whole bunch of Orbit's other gay stuff. And I can say on my own experience that it's all amazing and just so varied and so wonderful. Just like we were saying, to just have this kind of range of characters to like say, oh, Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, sorry, that took me a moment. I got yeah. It's you have a lot more. You should enter because then you might win the books, which is great. And that's my contribution. Right. Yeah, it's been lovely talking. And
so much fun.
Yeah, so much fun.
We'll probably do this again sometime without you guys. Sorry, but we live close enough to actually go out for coffee one day. So
that would be amazing. Leaving the house.
Thank you guys so much for coming.
I think we'll hover here for a moment until we hit another 20 seconds or so. But yeah.